Nick Saban clearly emotional. A tough loss as the regular season comes to an end for Alabama. A 10-2 regular season out of the college football playoff for the first time since its inception. We can already rule out Alabama. 2 losses for the first time since the 2010 season. Here's a look at what the teams in the college football playoff hunt have done or are doing right now. Ohio State, you know, they took care of business against Michigan, won their 8th in a row against the Wolverines. They are 12-0. LSU playing Texas A&M right now. They're going to move on and play Georgia in the SEC title game next week. Clemson takes care of South Carolina 38-3. Georgia beats Georgia Tech. There was some scuffling, some fighting in that game with George Pickens gets ejected. He will sit for the first half of the SEC title game. Alabama, of course, you just saw on CBS, they lose by 3. There was an argument, of course, if Georgia loses the SEC title game, Alabama slides up to the 4th spot, or you make the argument for Utah or Oklahoma. Minnesota, they're done. They lose to Wisconsin. Wisconsin will meet Ohio State in the Big Ten title game. Oklahoma will meet Baylor in the Big 12 title game. All right, let's welcome in CBS Sports Bowl expert Jerry Palm. And Jerry, you know I love this segment because basically every question I'm going to give to you is what if, a what if scenario, because that's what we play here in terms of the college football playoff. So my first what if here is in the SEC, right? So let's say Georgia beats LSU in the SEC title game. Two SEC teams into the college football playoff. What do you think?
Absolutely. That's the only way it happens is Georgia beats LSU. Both teams are in. Georgia would be ahead of LSU in whatever order they end up in. But, yeah, both teams would get in.
So if that doesn't happen, then who moves up to the 4th spot?
If Georgia loses, well, it's probably a 12-1 champion from the Pac-12 if Utah does it, or the Big 12 if it's Baylor or Oklahoma. But I think it's a 12-1 conference champion, assuming that there is one, would take Georgia's spot.
Who has the better case here to move up to 4? If Oklahoma beats Baylor in the Pac-12 and Utah beats Oregon, if Utah beats Oregon in the Pac-12 and Oklahoma beats Baylor in the Big 12, who has the better case to be 4?
I think that Oklahoma does because they'll have 2 wins over Baylor. They'll play a better schedule. And Utah's only win over a ranked team is going to be Oregon. And they have similar losses. USC is a team at the bottom of the rankings and probably still will be. Kansas State, a team that's been in and out of the bottom of the rankings. And so the losses aren't really different in any material way. But the extra ranked win, highly ranked win for Oklahoma to me carries the day.
So there's a chance here that Oklahoma sneaks back into the college football much like they did last year then.
Well, I suppose, yeah. I mean, that's obviously as long as they don't get that second loss, they've still got a shot.
All right, we'll see how that plays out next week. Oklahoma and Baylor in the Big 12 title game. As for the Big 10 title game, Ohio State and Wisconsin, a rematch from earlier in the season. Is Ohio State still in the playoff with a loss in the title game?
Yeah, Ohio State clinched today, and LSU can as they finish off A&M, which is obviously going very well. Ohio State clinched a spot in the playoff today. Even if they lose to Wisconsin, Ohio State's going to be one of the 4 best teams in front of the committee.
So Ohio State, LSU clinching spots. How about Clemson? Is Clemson a lock to make the playoff, or would a loss to Virginia in the ACC championship cost them?
Yeah, I mean, Clemson's different because as good as they've been over the course of this season, they've been good against bad teams, or, okay, average teams. But they don't have a win over a team in the rankings. They're not going to have a win over a team in the rankings. And in fact, if Virginia beats them, the only ranked team they will have played beat them. And they almost lost to North Carolina as well. So there really isn't much of a case for Clemson to be in the playoff if they lose to Virginia.
All right, so I kind of want you to play the role of Nostradamus because that's what you do anyway. You project, you predict things are going to happen. How do you see this playing out? If everything stays as is, right? So Oklahoma beats Baylor. Oregon loses to Utah. Utah is the Pac-12 champ. Ohio State beats Wisconsin in the Big Ten title game. LSU beats Georgia. What do you see happening in terms of the 4 teams in the college football playoff?
Ohio State, LSU, Clemson, and Oklahoma. I think Oklahoma gets in ahead of Utah because they will have beaten better teams.
I hope that's the case. That'll be a fun college football playoff. Ohio State, LSU, Clemson, and Oklahoma. 2 SEC teams would be out, of course, if Georgia loses to LSU in the SEC championship game next week on CBS. That's CBS Bowl expert Jerry Palm joining us here on HQ. Jerry, great stuff. Appreciate it. All right, so back here with Brian McFadden. You heard Jerry there. His top 4 teams, if everything holds, is Ohio State, LSU, Clemson, and Oklahoma. Your reaction?
Yeah, I can see that based on what we expect to see throughout tonight and then next week. I don't think Georgia will beat LSU. Now, granted, that would provide chaos if Georgia beats LSU. Because I do agree with Jerry also. I think LSU would still get in the top 4. I think they could potentially be the 4th seeded team. But as we see it right now, yes, I'm in agreement.
Do you see a situation, though, that Georgia beats LSU? Are you giving Georgia any chance to win the SEC title game?
Slim chance. Now, we saw some things happen today that could really hurt their chances, potentially not having Pickens to start the half, for a half, maybe suspended, not knowing exactly the injury status to DeAndre Swift, their best running back, a do-it-all type player, and already going into the SEC championship game without their best wide receiver in Kaiser. And Jake Fromm has not been playing well. He has not been playing well. He's been doing just enough for them to win ball games, but playing against the offense that they will play against next week in LSU, Jake Fromm will have to do more than enough.
Kirby Smart says DeAndre Swift's going to be A-OK. LSU would take care of business. They become the 2nd team in the college football playoff rankings. Clemson right now sitting at 3. Do they have to beat Virginia?
Yes, yeah.
To get in?
Because their schedule, how everything played out, was not as tough as some people thought it would be. They got A&M earlier in the year. I think it was the 2nd week. They're at home, took care of their business, but outside of Texas A&M, unfortunately for Clemson, the teams that were left on their schedule didn't do well. But I can say this much. They almost lost to North Carolina, and every other team outside of that ball game, they dominated. Today, South Carolina, their arch rival, the same South Carolina Gamecocks team that went to Athens, beat Georgia, wasn't even competitive at all. But they don't have the luxury like an LSU team, being able to lose a ball game, the last regular season ball game, and then still get an opportunity to get into the playoffs. They do not have the same luxury.
What's the gap, the separation? How small is it between Ohio State and LSU? You got number 1 offense, number 1 defense, Ohio State. You got one of the highest scoring team in the nation in Joe Burrow, the Heisman Trophy winner. You got an electric offense. You got Clyde Edwards-Helaire. You got J.K. Dobbins.
The gap is very, very small. The difference between those 2 ball clubs, LSU has a better offense, right? And that's hard to say because the numbers tells me that Ohio State, they have the better offense. But from the eye test, based on the teams that LSU played against defensively, they have played against tougher opponents on the defensive side, and they had their way. Outside of 23 points to Auburn, they've scored almost 50 points per ball game. Ohio State's offense they didn't have to play against the tough gauntlet that LSU played against, but Ohio State has a better defense.
Penn State, Michigan, that's a pretty tough gauntlet.
Huh?
That's a pretty tough gauntlet, Ohio State.
Oh, so you comparing Penn State, Michigan to Auburn, Florida. They didn't play Georgia this year. Even A&M.
Pretty good teams.
I mean.
All right, I'm just saying, pretty good teams. Like, you get a little credit.
We just saw, they beat Michigan by 30 points at home. That's the same Michigan team that got slapped on both sides of the face by Wisconsin, right? We saw Penn State struggle to Rutgers tonight, right?
Yeah,
it was 6-13 in the 4th quarter, right?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I understand what you're trying to do, but I don't think it's going.
You're great. All right. So let's say it's those 4 teams, right?
Yeah.
It's Ohio State, it's LSU, it's Clemson, and it's Oklahoma. So it would be 1 versus 4. It'd be Ohio State, Oklahoma, and then you have LSU and Clemson. Ohio State, they don't care who they play, But they have not forgotten the loss to Clemson 3 years ago when they got shut out in the college football playoff.
And you really don't
now they want to prove it.
You really don't want to play the Tigers first round.
No.
I think if you're Ohio State, if it
Give them the second round.
Yes, you take care of Oklahoma, a team that's basically one-sided, just offense, no defense. Right now, in my opinion, the Clemson Tigers, they're the scariest team that potentially could make the playoffs, and here's why. They're peaking at the right time. Early in the year, the concerns with Clemson was Trevor Lawrence, boy wonder. He's not playing up to the standard. He's not reaching the expectations. He was struggling, turnovers here or there. Now, in the last 4 or 5 ball games, he's starting to find his rhythm. Now, because of his rhythm, they're running the football better. And defensively, that defense has been playing lights out from the start of the season and currently right now. Now, when you get that total effort from both sides of the football, along with the experience and the coaching, Dabo Swinney is one of the best coaches in college football. When you put all of that together in that big pot with all these spices and you stir it up, you put it on a plate, it tastes so good. And that is the issue with Clemson, and they're fresher. They're fresher. I mean, their schedule has not been as difficult as some of the other teams. So when you pair up the talent, the freshness, and the coaching, and the big playability playing in big ball games, Clemson right now, if I had to pick a team out of the top 4, just how we see it tonight, I would pick Clemson.
To repeat.
Yes.
National champs, back-to-back.
Yes.
Clemson.
Yes.
The team that only won by 1 against North Carolina.
Let's do it like this, right? Clemson, throw out statistics. What would you rank Trevor Lawrence out of all the 4 quarterbacks we're talking about in the playoffs currently, how we see it today based on what Jerry said? Jalen Hurts, Justin Fields, Joe Burrow, Trevor Lawrence. What would you put Trevor Lawrence?
Probably 3rd. I'd probably put him in front of Justin Fields. Yeah.
Probably, right?
Because I think Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields are kind of right there.
And the reason why is because Trevor Lawrence had a slow start to the season. But if you needed to win one ball game, and that's what the playoffs is. Every game is a game 7. I don't know if I would have Trevor Lawrence 3rd. Then outside of Trevor Lawrence, the wide receivers, Mr. T. Higgins, Ross, Rodgers, then Travis Etienne, an experienced offensive line. Most of those guys played last year and dominated Alabama. Then defensively, I gave you the numbers early in today's show. I think Clemson is what? They're number 2 in total defense, number 3 in total offense in the nation, and number 2 in total defense. That's why I'm like, this Clemson team is starting to peak at the right time. And man, look out. If I had one ball game and you give me Dabo Swinney, Trevor Lawrence, Travis Etienne, Higgins, Ross, Rodgers, those guys on the defensive end, I think you're starting to kind of feel how I'm feeling, Hakeem. I see the look in your eye. I'm starting to sway you a little bit.
Are you saying all this because you're an ACC guy?
No, it had
nothing to do with it.
Clearly because I hate Clemson. I don't want to see Clemson win because it's not good for recruiting.
That's true.
It's not. But when I'm up here with you, I have to be unbiased. Except when we're talking Florida State. I'm biased. But right now I'm unbiased. I'm just talking about from the eye test. This team is peaking. That quarterback potentially will be number 1 when it's all said and done, when it's time to go pro.
Look, it's going to be a great college football playoff as it is every
year. We still have a
year.
week, though, right?
A lot could happen. But I mean,
playoff chaos next week.
I mean, Ohio State's into the college football playoff. LSU's in the college football playoff no matter what happens in the title game. I mean, in terms of the storyline, look, for Ohio State, it would be great if they matched up against Clemson in the national championship game, right? Let's exact revenge from 3 years ago. And it would also be great. It would also be great if they ended up meeting LSU because then they see Joe Burrow, who tries to get revenge against Ohio State. I don't know if there would be hard feelings. He played behind J.T. Barrett and Dwayne Haskins, got a shot at Ohio State. Yeah. But like that would be a great storyline as well. There's a lot of them. Jalen Hurts.
When you get into the playoffs, as a player, there's no need to look for any extra motivation. The motivation is already there, which is a national championship. For us, we look for the extra motivation to create bigger storylines. And I think we will have a storyline regardless of how it plays out. But I can tell you this much. We saw exciting ball games so far. We still have a late slate of quality games left to be played. But looking at the Iron Bowl tonight, that was good football.
It was. That was a lot of fun.
That was, especially if you're War Eagle.
You know what was really fun, too? Spending a full season with you in the regular season. 14 weeks.
14 weeks.
Rivalry week concludes on this
And
day.
you save your best outfit.
There it is.
For the most important weekend.
And Ohio State, let's go. O-H-V-E-R, because that's what I had. The
Over.
And it cashed.
I had the 9, 8.5. It didn't matter. They covered. We both won up here. Start listening to it.
Winners. We want winners. That's what we give you. That'll do it for the Iron Bowl postgame show presented by the PlayStation Store. For our entire crew, I'm Hakeem Dermish. Thank you for watching. Keep it locked. Top of the hour as we continue here on CBS Sports HQ. A bevy of highlights. Keep it locked. You're watching CBS Sports HQ.